All right, so we will keep going. This is the second week of our little thought of rescuing the Sabbath. And as I mentioned last week, Sabbath, the Hebrew word is Shabbat, and it literally means to stop or to cease or to be done. And we also talked about the fact that it has both physical and spiritual implications. Sometimes we focus more on the spiritual side of it, but it was also done for the physical reason too. Think of all the other laws in the Old Testament where the commands that God gave was even to let the land rest and to have a year of Jubilee. And so there was always this cycle, this rhythm of the physical side of life that God was trying to say, hey, take note of this. And so even with our own physical lives, this Sabbath this rest is meant to have a physical implication and a spiritual implication as well. And then we ended with, it can also mean to rest, to delight, and even to worship. So that's what we're going to kind of do for these 4 weeks. The last time we talked about, you're not going to be able to see the screen. So I can't make it work. Last time we talked about to stop. Today we want to talk about to rest. Next time we'll talk about to delight, and then the final time we'll talk about to worship. So those are the main focuses of this little session. So once again, those are the four: stop, rest, delight, worship. The verse we used last time was this: come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you. And there was our word: I will give you rest. And take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble heart, and you will find rest. And here's not only the rest of physical rest, but it's also a rest for your souls. And there's the spiritual side of it. So there's this rest that is there, and that's what we want to focus on. And once again, my yoke is easy and my burden is light. I mentioned that Thursday and Friday, I went with my son and a couple of his coworkers. Went to the U.S. Open Golf Tournament. So Friday all day long, we did over 15,000 steps, probably walked a couple miles. Crazy amount of walking we did. But it was great. But in conversations with them, it was just this interesting thing about how tired we all are and how tired we get. We're busy with stuff. And yet, Jesus is saying, my yoke is easy, my burden is light. Life isn't meant to be so overbearing all the time. And so the Sabbath, this rest, is an important part. And so even as Genesis said, God created, by the seventh day, God had finished the work that he had been doing. And on the seventh day, what did he do? He rested from his work. He stopped, but it's not just that he stopped, he rested. Did he need the rest? No. Set an example of the need for rest. And he blessed the seventh day, made it holy, because he rested from all the work of creating that he had been doing. So there's this place of just having to come and just step back and rest. And this, even as we talked about in the message here this morning, we talk about the need for not being comfortable and having a spiritual discontent. There's also the bad extreme of being discontent happens in the way we live our life. We think, I just need something more, so I keep working, I need more. Right? Millionaire, I forget who the millionaire was, the billionaire was said, how many more dollars do you need, will it be to be enough? And he says, just one more. Just one more. And so we can become very, very discontent in a bad way about things that we're working ourselves to death and trying to accumulate more and more stuff and all those things. And that's not what we're talking about here. Even Solomon said, the eye is not satisfied with seeing. That's just our nature. We're not ready to rest because we just see the next thing that we need to do, the next thing that we need to do, the next thing that we need to accumulate. And we just have to keep going. And then the other great philosopher of the Rolling Stones, I can't get no satisfaction. Right? So we just keep going. We just keep going. Now, truthfully, when you know the whole song, there's a whole different narrative to it. But again, so rest on the Sabbath. Rest on the Sabbath. It is really this design it's this thought about resting from work. And there's just that need to do that. I remember reading somewhere along the line that there was a time, and I can't remember the years now, when I think it was some country in Europe, I want to say it was France, they switched over, instead of a 5-day work week, they went to a 10-day work period, thinking that it would increase productivity, because you'd be in the middle of a project and you could keep working and get more done. And what they actually found was the 10-day straight working caused productivity to go down, morale to go down. And maybe you've seen that in different places where you worked and it's just more requirements. I mean, our jobs at Camp of the Woods were very intense. In the summertime, it was 10, 11, 12 weeks of just 60, 70, 80 hours a week. And you get to the end of it and you're spent. You're spent. Because why? Because our bodies were not meant to function. We need the rest. And so we need that built in. And so there is this need for rest from work. And there are different ways that other people have done it, right? I know people that do they work all their 40 hours in 3 days or 4 days, and then they have days off. Now, that might work better, but again, still, that's hard too, because your normal cycle, your normal rhythm of life is disrupted, and that makes things hard. And so there's this need, as God demonstrated himself, that he rested from his work. He just stopped and rested. He didn't, and again, in the sense of God, he didn't need it. Not like he was tired, but he was setting us an example of how we need to just come to a place and realize, okay, at this point, enough is enough. I'm not going to be as effective from this point on, and so I take a step back and I rest, rejuvenate my strength, and then I can move on. But I think also the other part of rest, it's not only resting from work, it's also, I think, resting from thinking about work.
Jeepers, you're hitting every single point.
And I go back to our time at Camp of the Woods, right? And again, there's something where life does consume us sometimes, right? But again, we also need a rest from thinking about work. I remember when we were at Camp of the Woods, I bought a cheap boat, and so my idea of just getting away was to go out on the boat and sit in the middle of the lake. I was not on the property, but I went on the property. But you know what? Whenever I went out on my boat, I had two things with me: my cell phone and the camp radio. So
you're really not that free.
I really wasn't that free. I wasn't able to not think about work. And that was difficult. I remember going to, I think it was my nephew's wedding in Michigan, and we were in a Culver's restaurant.
Oh.
I remember, love Culver's. We're in a Culver's restaurant, and my phone rang, and it was during camp season, and the call was, the state health inspector's here. What do we do? And I was like, I was expecting him like a week or two after I was back. He just showed up out of nowhere, and I'm like, so here it is. That lunch was ruined.
Yep.
That was ruined because you need a break from thinking about work here.
No, it's just I wish I could help you more, help you, and all these people who can't turn it off. How about this one? So my wife's coworkers will email her at night, and they're both up thinking about, and when I'm talking night, I'm talking like 1:30 in the morning, and they hear a bing, and I'm like, what's going on? She goes, well, hey, I've been thinking about this and this program and this, I mean, just, so once again, you just got to turn it off and say, all right, from this hours, I am not going to look at my email. I mean, and if you feed that narrative, then, but once again.
Well, and even in that, because I think about when I did therapy, and you have a client who's suicidal, and you really think, and you're trying to get them in the hospital, and there's a process, and in the meantime, you know, fortunately, I don't know how people do it without faith, because I had to step back, pray, and say, Father, you're in control of this.
Yeah.
You know?
And we talked about it a little bit last time too, right? There are seasons of times. There are
Yeah.
seasons where we'll do this, but we can't live our whole life this way. And so we need to build in these things where we are trying to do that. And that should become the focus of where we're aiming. And rescuing the Sabbath is, okay, how do we build in time to rest? Not only rest from work, but rest about thinking for work. So maybe it is. You have a thing where he's like, I turn off my phone and I'm just unavailable. And that's,
Well, no, but my point wasn't the severity, it was the severity forced me into a rest
yeah.
in God.
Yeah, there you go.
You know, and
Yep,
so,
yep.
so the rest in thinking about it was me saying, you know what, Father, I know you're good. I know you
Yep.
got, but it took a long time and it builds in trust. I'm gonna take this day and I trust you that I'm still gonna have the economy. I'm still gonna have the
Yep,
issues,
yep,
you
yep,
know,
yep.
and you have, it deepens your
Yeah,
trust in
perfect.
Him.
Yeah. So again, we're trying to build these things in, right? Because this is our tendency is that we're not stopping our work.
Yeah.
We're not stopping thinking about work.
Right. Just a praise. Let me just say a praise, which leads to a prayer thing. We just planted 850 acres worth of corn in 5 days. And this was people working extra shifts, extra time, late into the night, early the next day. You know, the 3-ring circus was in show. You know, we were juggling balls, and people's nerves are at frazzle level at the end of this. I mean, literally people are doing sign language with each other, and you're saying to yourself, just, you stay over there, you stay over there. But now comes this, where as not just a man of God, but we're to rest.
Yeah.
And I'm not to yoke and whip and say, hey, we got another,
Yeah.
10 days of catch up to do, because while we were doing this,
Other things.
all this stuff is not being done.
Yeah.
So now I have to be like, okay, just now at the same time, a month later, it'll be like, okay, we've rested now.
Let's pick it up. Yeah. So we're resting from work, rest from thinking about work, and then I think the other thing is the rest from wanting and worrying. We just need to take a step back from that, because that's draining too. If we're always desiring the next thing, Solomon's thing, the eye never stops foreseeing and wanting. If we don't take a break from that, if we don't take a break from just the worrying about everything, we just need those times to step back and rest from that. Just, I think, Jill, to your point, how do we trust God? Okay, God has said that if you stop and if you rest, you work for the 6 and you stop, I'll provide. Even in the giving, I reflect back too, and you know it as well, right? When God gave them manna, what did he tell them to do? Enough for one day. One day at a time, except on Friday.
Well,
Then you picked up 2 days, so you had enough for the Sabbath, so you didn't have to go out and pick it up. And so even there's a trust, like, okay, I'm going to pick up double today. And
But
God,
that was God providing it that way too.
yes.
So-
Yeah, so it was a rest from worrying about what's going to happen tomorrow, because I imagine that first time that happened, okay, because they've seen it in other days, right? If they picked it up on Monday and they didn't use it all on Monday and they went back on Tuesday, what happened? The Bible says that it was wormy and it was all destroyed. So they're going, okay, so now they get to Friday, they're like, okay, wait a minute, I picked twice as much. Is this going to do what happened on Monday and Tuesday? And you wonder about that, and then after you see that, you begin to.
but for Lysis, they had to be trained, just like a young kid.
Yeah.
Where it's like, okay, what's too little, what's too much? I'm gonna grab, just take 1 cookie. You don't need 3.
Yeah.
But what about tomorrow? It's like, okay.
Yeah. So this is the verse we looked at last time, and it was this. It was remember the Sabbath. That's the command. Remember the Sabbath. Keep it holy. 6 days you're going to labor, do all your work. 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea, and all. And he rested on the 7th day. But the key word here is remember, and that's what we talked. And that was the idea of stopping. And we talked about how there are certain things that we should remember. And we talked about that at the very end last time. But now when you get to, this is Exodus, when you get to Deuteronomy, and the command is repeated again, just notice the difference of what it says in Exodus and what it says in Deuteronomy. Instead of remember, now it says observe. Not remember. Remember is the command to think back of why it's instituted. Now he's saying observe it. Actually do the resting. Do the resting. And it's almost the exact. Remember the Sabbath day? Observe the Sabbath day by keeping it holy, as the Lord your God has commanded you. 6 days labor. And then here's the different thing is he says, now it's the remember that you were slaves in Egypt and that the Lord brought you out and he did it with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. Therefore, the Lord your God has commanded you to observe the Sabbath day.
Do you think that's a trusting thing to
Yeah.
remember that God did all this? You
Yes.
don't have to worry that
Yeah.
things are going to go bad, that
Yeah.
you're going to miss an opportunity.
So here, this word observe that's used twice here, again, it's the Hebrew word is shamar, and it means to keep a watch over or to guard. So now instead of remembering, to reflecting back on, now it's observe. It's the idea of guard the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. Remember that the Lord your God has commanded you to guard the Sabbath day. Put up some walls, some barriers, some protective things. Keep watch over it. Make sure that you're doing it. It's not just remember that it's a command of God, but now actually do something with it, and now this command to rest. I found it interesting, too, that when he says in Exodus, the Sabbath is tied to creation. We talked about that it's the Sabbath. Remember, God worked for 6 days, he rested on the seventh. It's all creation. It's the rhythms of life. But here in Deuteronomy, Sabbath is tied to the liberation. He says, remember that you were slaves, but you were set free.
Amen.
So, Jill first and then...
It made me think of who was the prophet, was it Nehemiah? Who basically, because they kept doing work and trade and bartering, he just locked the gates. He guarded it by just shutting it down. Just nobody's allowed in here to do business. And he ticked off a lot of people because they'd gotten so far from it. But it had gotten so bad that he did literally guard the people
Observe.
from sinning.
Yeah, observe.
Yeah.
Joe.
Yeah, I joined not kind of a membership, but a thing on Facebook about the Jewish people, because I really just love them to death. And I'm watching a thing on holistic Jews. And that is so interesting, and how, I guess they're more Pharisaic than,
Probably. Yeah.
and I did not realize, especially about the Sabbath, how particular.
Oppressive.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's a very
Yeah.
good word, but they were very, very, you had to wear certain clothes, even
Yeah.
certain clothes you had to be modest, and
Yeah.
I mean.
Well, I remember some stayed at a hotel I was working at, and they had to walk in and get me to turn off the lights.
Yeah.
Because they weren't allowed to turn
Yeah.
off the lights.
Yeah.
Yep.
And they had to walk in and get me to turn on, and I was like. Really?
So again, that's part of what,
That's considered work.
Yeah.
that was what the Jewish people have been ingrained in that mentality of remembering and observing.
Right.
And so they, again, took it to the legalistic
Extreme.
side, to the
Oh, very
extreme,
much.
where
Out of fear.
where the Pharisees did that, because again, but they were trying to, in their sense, they were trying to honor what God had said.
And I feel sorry for the common folk, because the Pharisees and the Sadducees could do these things because they lived a religious life,
Yeah.
whereas a common guy, I mean, you just can't help but everywhere you go, I mean, think about it, everything was unclean. If you went out in the
Yeah.
world, you had to be, I mean, when you walk down these streets, some of these guys would take their robes and like tuck them really close in,
yeah.
because we can't let it brush up against anybody that was unclean. And it's like, how exhausting.
Yeah.
I mean, no wonder when Christ says, just come at peace, be at
Yeah.
ease. I'm not trying to make this hard.
Yeah.
Oh, but these guys are, but that's just.
So again, these two recitations of this, first one, Exodus, tied to creation, Deuteronomy tied to liberation. And in Exodus, right, it's the focus of that we talked about last time, that it's creation is the rhythm of life and how we do that. But it's interesting here, with it tied to liberation, it's not the idea of rhythm, but it's the idea of the focus is resistance. Resist what's going on around you. Lock the gates if necessary to prevent the world from influencing you and doing the resting that you need to do. And so I think the point is, what's being taught here in this idea is this, that we're no longer slaves. We can resist. We're no longer slaves to our desire to accomplish and achieve. We're gonna put our trust in God to provide. So I'm not a slave to having to accomplish more, to achieve more, to accumulate more things. I can and I'll put that up there too. We're not trying to accumulate more stuff. God provides. Again, the manna thing. Get enough just for the day, and the next day I'll provide more. So why did they need to? How much time did they need to spend accumulating stuff? And they didn't do that. And so this resistance of resisting what is going on around us is part of the Sabbath too. It's not only accomplishing, achieving, accumulating. It's also we're no longer slaves to our desire to act on our sinful desires. We can step back from that. We're no longer in the Sabbath. That's the freeing thing. When we can step back and really rest, we recognize that we're not slaves to this life. We're slaves to God, but not slaves to this life. So our sinful natures don't do that. And so even the message this morning that we strive and we achieve and we're straining toward the goal of the prize. Our focus is in a different direction. So this idea of rest, which we'll get to in the next couple sessions, it turns us we're resisting the worldly influence and impact on our life, and we're turning our attention in the Sabbath to God and what He has provided for us and what He's giving. So when we talk about delight, we delight in Him. When we talk about worship, we're worshiping Him. And so these become the focus in our rest. We're resting from this so that we have more time to do this. Less time to get caught up in the achieving and the accumulating and our sinful desires. And we have more time to focus on God and what He's doing and what He would have us to do. And even in a sense, we're growing and not becoming comfortable in our Christian life, but we're becoming discontent and moving in a direction to try to learn more about God. Joan, I saw your hand kind of
Yeah,
pop
well,
up.
I wanted to, I don't know if it was you or if I was listening to Dr. Jeremiah or Dr. Robert Jeffers, but they were talking about that everybody, thinks, especially in the Christian world, Protestant, whatever you want to call it, they think they have to have Sunday as the Sabbath day, and it's real. And he was pointing out that God didn't necessarily talk about having Sunday, like most of our people do. It's one day a week. It doesn't matter whether it's Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, but it takes one day out. And
Yeah, and we talked about that a little bit last time too. The fact, right, that so in the Jewish culture, the Sabbath was Saturday,
right.
and we talked about the fact that it's also not a sunrise to sunrise thing. It's a sunset to sunset thing. So in the Jewish culture, Sabbath starts Friday night when the sun goes down.
Yep.
And so what's built into that rhythm of that is that it's already built in that part of your Sabbath is you sleeping
Right.
and you resting and being away from work and not doing work. And in light of what we're saying here, we're resting from work, we're resting from thinking about work, and our sleep should be a time when we rest from worrying. And I think about, just thinking about that, I think the number of times that I've laid awake at night, woken up by sleep by worrying, that's not God's intention for us.
Or weird dreams.
Or weird dreams or whatever. Yeah,
Something you
but
wouldn't
that, and so again, Jewish was Friday sundown to Saturday sundown. And again, the early church changed that to Sunday because they wanted to celebrate and recognize the risen Savior. And so again, they made that transition, but you're right. For us, Sunday may be the most convenient day for us, because if we're going to delight in worship, when do we do that? We do that on Sunday.
And together as a group.
And together with the body.
That's important.
And we do
Yes.
that, and that's an important thing. But then the rest of the day becomes a day of things that we'll talk about. But you can also do it. We're choosing to do it. We're trying to do it. Didn't work well this week. But we're trying to do Friday night sundown to Saturday sundown. That's what we're trying to do. And then Sunday, our time of worship.
That's your big work day.
Yeah, but to me, but again, it's work for me, but it's bonus time.
Yeah.
If you view it that way, this is bonus. I've been able to worship in my Sabbath here, right? But then I get this bonus. Now I've done it by myself, or I've done it with my wife. But now I get
to do
bonus.
with a fellowship of believers.
Yeah, now I get to do it with believers, and that's the great thing. So.
Well, and they used to meet every day with believers,
Yeah,
so
and-
that
yeah,
you
yeah,
could pick a Sabbath because they always met.
Yeah.
You know, Scott, you were talking about, like, how the Jewish do it from, Friday to
Yep.
whatever. And I heard a preacher, and I thought it was a very interesting way of describing putting your worries to bed. He said, set up a little bed, make one out of sticks or whatever. And with a blanket and a pillow, and maybe if you got a tiny little teddy bear, your favorite thing. And that is your worry bed, and you place that beside your bed or wherever you want to place it, and you say, okay, I'm putting my worries to bed, and I'll pick them up the next morning
And maybe we don't need to pick them up the next day too.
Well, true, but I mean, you don't have, the idea was you don't take them in your own bed at night and do it. You put it in that worry bed and just say, okay, here's your blankie, here's your teddy bear, pacifier, whatever. And
So,
go from there.
So in rescuing the Sabbath, we talked about this last time. Sabbath is not just an inspirational or an aspirational idea. It's not something. It shouldn't be just something. I'd like to do that. We need to recognize that it is a command. God told us to do it, and I believe that for some of us who would, I still think the 10 Commandments are good things. While we're not bound to them, we're free in Christ, and we're not bound by the law. They're still great things that would be helpful to our life if we would just honor them. And I think there's so much in the Old Testament that is helpful to us, that while it's not having the same implications that it did to the people of Israel, for us as followers, there's still good things for us to be reminded of. So again, but it is a command. Even Jesus talked about, that there was this need for the Sabbath, but as Jesus said, right, men were not created for the Sabbath, but the Sabbath was created for men, so that there was a purpose for it. And as we talked about before, it's a practice that we need to do. So we're trying to get this practice going in our own life. And so even as we talked about last time, you prepare for the day. So as I said last time, just pick a day and try it. And you might not be able to do a whole day, but try 3 or 4 hours of just stopping, putting your phone away, putting other distractions away, and just giving your attention to God. And in this case, prepare for the day. If we're talking about this idea of rest, prepare for the day. So what does that look like? That means prepare for the day. That means if you're going to rest, that means maybe let's say you're going to do Friday sunset to Saturday sunset, that means maybe it's Friday during the day or Thursday during the day, it's extra time to prepare your meals for the next day. So you know what you're going to eat, and so you're not working as hard at the preparation of meals. It's just something simple that you have. It's there, available. You get it. You go do all your grocery shopping for that day. You're prepared. You don't have to go out. And again, it's just, but you're preparing yourself for that time of rest. You're thinking about how am I going to spend my time? How am I going to do it? And this preparation of getting yourself so you're not working, you're not thinking about working, and you're not worrying. You're prepared. Now we're going back to the manna thing. The preparation for the Sabbath day was built in by God. He provided food for them for 2 days. They didn't have to think about it. And maybe that's something that we could do. So that preparation of getting yourself to a place where you could be ready. Because undoubtedly, you'll be like we are. Maybe you have the same thing. We sit down to pray, and everything bombards us, all the thoughts we have. And sometimes if you're just resting on a Sabbath day, we found that, you think to yourself, oh, I'm sitting here and I'm just kind of sitting quietly and resting, and I look and I say, oh, I see a cobweb over there. Yeah, I gotta clean. And then you start doing that, and next thing you know, you're doing all this house cleaning work or other thing. I was like, no, just set that aside. So maybe the day before, maybe it's, okay, get rid of all the distractions, whatever. But just this preparing for the day. And then I think also you're preparing not only for the day, but you're gonna prepare for the external resistance. You will be bombarded with things that will come to try to distract you from actually resting.
So how do you do that?
Yeah.
Yeah, good
Turn off
answer.
the phone, lock the door, turn off the lights.
Yeah. Maybe.
Move the car so nobody can
Maybe.
see your home.
Maybe.
If you know where some of that's
Yeah.
coming from,
Yeah. Go ahead, Angel.
make an announcement.
Yeah,
You know, if it's your phone or your people, just say, hey, or your job. You know, we used to at Camp of the Woods put the notice on our email.
Yeah.
We will not be in the office until such and such a time. We'll answer you then.
Yeah.
Maybe that's what you,
Yeah.
if you know people are gonna interrupt you, say, hey, not available on this day.
Yeah.
What a great testimony if you could have imagine if you had a different answering to messages was like, we are practicing the Sabbath right now. You are important to us. We will get back to you when we are available.
That's
So
right.
that, along those lines. And same thing when you're engaging with somebody and the phone dings and they look at you like, are you gonna answer this? I mean, he and I've done this numerous times. It's like, you gonna answer this? And it's like, no, I'm not. It's because
Yeah.
you look first. No, I'm not gonna look.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think, so preparing your mind, so we do that. So for us, Sabbath is, we really are set down that, so text messages, we're trying to set our phones away. And so, but text messages and phone calls from our family, we're gonna take those. But anybody else, and again, it's just, we're trying to guard it. And that's the thing, right? You're guarding. So, and again, my role as a pastor, I mean, if I got a text message from somebody that said, hey, this person is dying, and okay, that might
Supersede.
that might supersede. But if
It's like
it's
a
like,
donkey falling in the
hey, I need help moving my refrigerator. Okay, nope, I'm just gonna ignore that. I'm gonna move on. Because again, you're trying to guard and protect and prepare, because there will be resistance. In the world in which we live, there will be resistance to keep us from doing that. So, Joe.
But what just in my mind is, there is a matter of conscience, I think, in it. Because there are something, when it comes to what we do to achieve, what we do to earn money, all that stuff, we gotta set that aside. But I think of when I was in college, the Sabbath in college, of course, they locked the laundry rooms. They locked, in order to keep us from doing laundry and
Yep.
doing the things that we should have been doing during the week and
Yep.
work. But they also said the guys would be out trying to play frisbee, and they said no frisbee. And to me, that's a form of rest. That's not part of, that's enjoying
Yep.
nature, that's throwing.
Yep.
But again, I think it has to be your conscience. If you feel like it's work,
Yep.
if you feel like it's, if you're playing professional football, no. Just-
Yeah, well,
I don't know.
yeah, and we'll come to that in the next time, when we
Okay.
talk about the delight factor.
Yeah.
What does it mean in this rest component, but you also are able to delight in things too.
Yeah.
So what does that look like, and in those things together? But
I
again,
mean,
there's
some people can't spend a day in prayer and contemplation without feeling like
Yeah.
it's work.
yeah.
Without
So
feeling-
again, there's this again, we're resting in that we're not in our regular routine of things, but there are things that it's not like this total absence of not doing anything.
And it's not a 24-hour prayer meeting.
Yes.
Right.
It's not that.
Exactly.
It's noticing.
Yeah.
It's more noticing.
Yeah. And so there's going to be the external resistance and then the internal one, obviously, because your innards are going to be screaming. Your innards are going to be screaming at you all the time. I should be doing this. I should be doing that. I should be. You're listening to things in your mind, all the things that you need to do, and
It's
then
good practice, good practice.
it's just this.
My son-in-law loves to be active. I mean, if you, like some of us can lounge around and watch TV all day, he about 4 hours in, he's like, I'm done. I can't. I need to go for a walk, or I need to go do something
Go
else.
build something, gotta
You
go
know,
build
just-
something.
I need more than this, and it's okay.
Yeah.
Just,
But part of the internal resistance is how we've been wired by our culture. In that there's that thing, you've always got to be busy, and I think there is some personality that people like to do that. But again, maybe it's just focusing your attention on, okay, I want to accomplish something different. I'm not building something. I'm not just maybe watching vegging on, binging on Netflix all day long. But again, I'm setting aside the resistance of other things to focus on, again, what we're going to get to, delighting and worshiping, those things. Angela?
I think speaking to that thing about the culture's influence, I found that when someone asks me what I'm doing or what I did, I'll say, oh, it was a rest day, it was a Sabbath day, and I got well, it must be nice.
Isn't that sad?
And I'm like, but it can be nice for you too. And
Why don't you join me next week?
part of the preparing for the two resistances is part of the reason we practice Sabbath is to say out loud to anyone who cares, but to God, is the world does not require our participation to keep running. It's God's. We can take 24 hours off. You can you're not indispensable. God is doing the work. Let's stop and reflect on His goodness for 24 hours.
And I think that's why the poor are in a better position to grow their faith. Because honestly, I've met people who are so poor that they have 2 or 3 jobs, they work every single day because that's the only way they meet their rent. And taking a day off is literally home or no home, home or homeless. And so that's why I think Paul said, the poor are in a better position to experience the goodness of God, to experience the fellowship of the group and people helping and coming alongside them.
Yeah. So this rest component is it's one thing to stop what you're doing, but then to kind of plan for rest. That's a different thing. Because again, we do have to plan it, right? That's one thing we do, right? We do it with our vacations, don't we? I mean, sometimes our vacations are more intense than maybe our regular
rest
life.
after your vacation.
Yeah, I do. But some of our best vacations were where we just planned to say, okay, our day is, we get up in the morning, we have breakfast, and we go sit on the beach. And that's it. And then we would go to dinner and lunch was just get whatever you want, just kind of, we'd have a nice breakfast together, just kind of call it grazing for lunch. Everybody got what they wanted. And then we would go to dinner at 4:30 because we were in the Myrtle Beach area for years, and crowds just would flood. And so we'd go with the old people, for the early bird specials at 4:30 because we'd get in there, there'd be no line. When we'd leave at 5:30, 5:45, the line would be around the building. And then we just go home. But again, those are the best vacations. Our plan was, you're gonna play on the beach, you're gonna sleep. If you want to sleep on the beach, you can sleep on the beach. If you want to read on the beach, if you want to listen to music on the beach, if you want to swim, you swim. But the plan was just really simple. This is a planned rest. And it can be done. But we get out of the habit of doing it. Because once again, and I'll throw this up from before, we tend to like our cell phone battery, we tend to live at the wrong charge. We tend to be on the rundown end. And what a stopping and what a resting helps us do is move up in the charging and feeling charged and feeling energized to do what we need to do for the other days of the week. As we've all undoubtedly been somewhere in our life, when you've worked too many hours or worked too long on a day, it just takes a while to get recharged. My example from the last couple of days. Thursday, we left. We drove to Pittsburgh area. We had a place to stay. And we knew we wanted to be very early at the golf course. We wanted to be the first ones there so that we could get in and see around a little bit, stake out what our plan for the day was. The first golfers were teeing off at 6:45 a.m. and we were about 40 minutes away from where we were staying. So we got into the place we were staying about 8 o'clock Thursday night, and we were up. I set my alarm for 4:15. And
Angela time, yeah.
Angela time, exactly, Angela time. And so we were up at 4:15, and then after the golf tournament, we drove straight home from Pittsburgh. We got back to our house here at 12:45 p.m. AM, 12:45 a.m. Yeah, that was a long day. So between a short night of sleep on Thursday night and a short night of sleep on Friday night, I was feeling it yesterday. And so
Somebody needed a nap.
somebody needed a nap and rest, yeah. But again, that's the thing. We know and we talked about that last time. Understanding the rhythm of your body and knowing what your body needs. And so, yeah, so I might have been drained down, but I can tell you that while I feel better this morning than I did yesterday morning, I'm still not fully recovered because it takes me more nights of good sleep to kind of build up when I've had short nights of sleep. And again, this is the process. So this is why the rest is important, because we need to stop, we need to rest. Our bodies need it, our minds need it, and our spirits need it too, to rest from that. So we'll stop there. We'll pick up in a couple weeks. Yeah, you can stop there, April.